Hello and good morning to the Americas, good afternoon to Europe and Africa, and good evening to Asia and Australasia. My name is Steve Lacey and I am the Isrrt Director of Education. Welcome to this June edition in the Isrrt monthly webinar series where we bring you the special topic of clinical education. Education, of course, is incredibly important in our profession as it ensures safe and efficient practice, and we are very, very privileged today to have a number of experts from across the globe to talk about their perspectives in clinical education in their region. Now, as always, if you have any questions for any of the speakers, please put them into the chat and we will go through them at the end of the presentations itself. So let's start with our first speaker, who's going to be covering the Australia and Asia region, and that is Mr. Greg Trippis. Greg currently holds the position of clinical educator at the Sunshine Coast Health Service in Queensland, Australia. He has been a clinical radiographer for over 25 years with experience in a wide range of imaging modalities. The majority of these years have been in the clinical educator role. Greg is passionate about the student clinical training journey and the ongoing continuing professional development of health practitioners. He continues to practice radiography across a range of clinical areas in a large tertiary hospital and mentoring students and junior staff along the way. Greg was actually one of my first clinical educators when I was a student, and I owe a great debt to his teaching, and I wouldn't be here today without Greg. So thank you, Greg. Thank you, and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you firstly to the ISRRT for the opportunity to provide an Australian perspective on clinical education in medical imaging. My name is Greg Trippis and I'm a diagnostic radiographer and clinical educator from Queensland, Australia. For those unfamiliar with Australia, Queensland is a state on the eastern seaboard of the country and is famous for its beautiful beaches and beautiful weather. The material of this presentation is my own interpretation of clinical education. The views expressed are my own, and being a diagnostic radiographer, this will be the primary focus of my material. There are some words that I'll be using which may be unfamiliar to those in different parts of the world. So some of the definitions of some of the words include: clinical educator refers to a current clinical practitioner who combines an educational role. A public hospital in Australia is a government-funded hospital with care provided free of charge, and a private hospital in Australia is a company-owned hospital with care provided at a cost. My own work settings are a large public hospital with a 700-bed capacity, offering all medical imaging services across diagnostic imaging, nuclear medicine, and a large cancer centre for radiation therapy services. In my clinical educator role, I am the sole clinical educator across the health service. I have a clinical roster at times. I look after the staff education and ongoing education of the staff. I look after all the student clinical placements, providing supervision and formal and informal assessment. I'm a mentor to new graduates. I have line manager duties, including a modality team leader role, perform basic life support and patient handling training, and try and be a role model to the staff. A little bit of an overview of what I'll be covering over the next little while: a brief background on the medical radiation sciences training in Australia, the variation of the clinical educator role across the country, what are some of the tools and support for clinical educators, what are some of the emerging and ongoing discussion topics, and a summary and conclusion. The medical radiation sciences training is provided by 11 universities offering medical imaging, radiation therapy and nuclear medicine courses, but by far the medical imaging courses are the most abundant. The universities are spread mostly across the eastern seaboard of the country, correlating with the large population on that side of the country. The majority of the courses have now moved to a 4-year model, whereas traditionally they were a 3-year degree with a professional development year at the end. All courses have differing models and all have embedded clinical placement time. With respect to medical or diagnostic imaging, the clinical placement time embedded in the courses varies from 30 weeks over the course up to 52 weeks, and these are approximate number of weeks. With respect to the clinical educator role, there is variation across the country. Some workplaces, like mine, have a single dedicated person in the role. Some workplaces have a team of dedicated clinical educators. Some workplaces have no dedicated person. Rather, the tasks are allocated to anyone that is interested in that role. Most large public health services, however, now have clinical educator roles embedded within their organisational structures. Due to this large variation, I took it upon myself in 2024 to find out a little bit more about the role across Australia. So I created and sent a survey to as many clinical educators as I could, seeking their opinions and thoughts. Over the next few slides, I hope to share some of their opinions and thoughts from the survey. There were 58 responses. The majority of those were from diagnostic or medical imaging clinical educators, and again, like we saw with the courses, the respondents mostly came from the eastern seaboard, from the states of Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania, again correlating with the population spread of Australia. The majority of respondents work in large public hospitals, which is a hospital with over 300 bed capacity, large public hospitals which had smaller satellite sites attached to them, small public hospitals which are less than 300 beds, and private companies as well. The spread of clinical roster and education role varied. Number one being there was education roles with some clinical roster. Others had education role with a full clinical roster, so they were performing the educational tasks on top of a whole clinical roster. There were some educators which have no clinical roster, and others had something in between. The top 6 key expected responsibilities from the perspective of clinical educators was number 1, student induction, student supervision, education activities for departmental education and CPD programs, clinical load, clinical work, staff mandatory training, things like basic life support and online modules, and performing new staff induction and orientation. Interestingly, when clinical educators were asked if there was enough time allocated for them to perform their tasks well, there was an 80% response of a clear no. What are the top 5 challenges according to clinical educators? No surprises that number 1 is a lack of time. Number 2 is finding presenters for in-services or in-house CPD programs. The perception of a lack of enthusiasm to education. There were high expectations of the role and performance managing particularly struggling students. What are some of the tools and supports that are available for clinical educators? Especially while students are on clinical placement, universities are always available to contact. And that is particularly useful if we have any student-related issues. We have access to state health department resources. These can include policies, guidelines, procedures, or any other online tools relating to clinical education. One thing we've done well and am fortunate to be a part of is the creation of a national clinical educator network, AUSMICE, in Australia. This stands for Australian Medical Imaging Clinical Educators. It is a register of clinical educators, and we share advice, we share tips, we share material. It's a very invaluable resource which I've used and continue to use in the role. We've progressed to holding a national clinical educator forum every 2 years, somewhere in Australia, and these run over 2 days. And again, we all find these invaluable. What are some of the emerging and ongoing discussion topics within clinical education across the medical radiation sciences? And again, these are in my opinion. The first is clinical educator role position funding. There's been limited resource increasing in the clinical educator role space over the years. There are some current and projected workforce shortages for practitioners. This may ultimately lead to increase in student numbers. Quality of clinical placement is another topic which pops up every now and then, and this is where in some departments students are seen as staff and may not necessarily get their full learning experience. The quantity of clinical placement is another topic which pops up every now and then, and placement poverty is a new term which describes students are unable to earn an income, especially while they're on these long placements. One of the solutions for this is a reduction of overall clinical placement time. This may in turn lead to work readiness issues. And there are the national registration standards which we all adhere to. It is a challenge for universities to ensure that they are all met during the course duration. In summary, the clinical educator role does vary across Australia, as you've seen. The role is not always given the time needed to perform it well. University courses themselves vary across Australia, and with a current and projected practitioner shortage across the country, they may lead to an increase in student numbers, which may ultimately lead to pressure on clinical placement capacity, pressure on clinical placement duration, and in terms of ultimate work readiness of graduates. One of the solutions could be better future resourcing of an at times undervalued role. Thank you for your attention and good day.
About the situation in Australia as far as clinical education is concerned. We're going to move now over to the Nordic region, and we're welcomed today by Dr. Hallie Precht. Dr. Hallie Precht is an associated professor at the University of Southern Denmark and Lillebælt Hospital, and an associated senior lecturer at the University College in Lillebælt, Denmark, and an adjunct senior lecturer at the University College in Cork, Ireland. As a passionate radiographer, Hallie is dedicated to developing diagnostics, technology, and new ways of working to benefit patients. She has trained an increasing number of diagnostic radiography students, being an external supervisor and examiner at different universities, and is an author of a large number of scientific oral communications, conference abstracts, and papers. Hallie is dedicated to cardiovascular imaging, optimization within DR and CT imaging, and works both as a researcher and research manager to drive forward this principle with a radiography perspective. Research management has lately been a great focus at the Educational Institution of UCL University College and for the entire Lillebælt Hospital, University Hospitals of Southern Denmark in Kolding. Thank you, Hallie, for giving us an overlook of the clinical education standard in the Nordic region.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank you, the Isrrt, for the possibility to have this presentation about the current status of clinical education radiography. So I'm representing Scandinavia. I'm Helle Precht. I'm an associate senior lecturer at UCL University Colleges. I'm an associate professor at the University of Southern Denmark, and then I'm a research manager at Lillebælt Hospital, University Hospital of Southern Denmark. At the side, I'm an adjunct lecturer at University College Cork in Ireland. At the moment, I'm the EFRS, which is the Society of Radiography in Europe, a chair of the research committee as well. So Denmark is a small country placed in the northern part of Europe. We have 5.8 citizens. We are part of the European Union, and we are recognized for our welfare state, which is the same in all Scandinavia. So this is due to free education. We have free healthcare systems. We have welfare payments when we are out of work. So all these things is needed a high tax level to cover these expenses. The country is famous for our fairy tale writer, Hans Christian Andersen, the King family, The Little Mermaid, and Lego, which I think some of you may know. The higher educational system in Denmark and in the Nordic countries, Scandinavia, is regulated by the government, meaning that it's the government deciding about the degree of structures the number of students we're able to take into the education, teacher qualifications and examinations. So all these institutions are therefore accredited every 5th year, meaning that the quality of the education and all the paperwork around the education are checked and tested carefully. The educational system is based on a bachelor degree, which is in university colleges. Then you have bachelor degrees, Master of Science and PhD level, which is in the universities. Meaning that this structure is due to the system in Denmark itself, and then it's according to history, I may say. So this is the reason why I have all the different positions, because my research positions are primarily at the universities and at the university colleges, but the education, radiography education, is at university colleges. So Scandinavia is in the very northern part of Europe. I think most of the systems in all the countries, included in Scandinavia, is the same. So it's a structured approach. It's integrating theoretical learning with hands-on training. But the difference is that in Denmark, we have university colleges. In Finland, they have University of Applied Sciences. While in Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, they have the radiography educations placed at universities. Radiography education is taking 3.5 years to conclude or to end up becoming a radiographer. We have 120 ECTS in theory and 90 ECTS in clinical training in the hospitals. The students are together for the first 2 years, and they have 1.5 years after that for specialization, where they choose for either diagnostic radiography, radiotherapy, or nuclear medicine. They're able to work as a diagnostic radiographer even though they took the education as nuclear medicine. Hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank you, the Isrrt, for the possibility to have this presentation about the current status of clinical education radiography. So I'm representing Scandinavia. I'm Helle Prægt. I'm an associate senior lecturer at UCL University Colleges. I'm an associate professor at the University of Southern Denmark, and then I'm a research manager at Lillebælt Hospital, University Hospital of Southern Denmark. At the side, I'm an adjunct lecturer at University College Cork in Ireland. At the moment, I'm the EFRS, which is the Society of Radiography in Europe, a chair of the research committee as well. So Denmark is a small country placed in the northern part of Europe. We have 5.8 citizens. We are part of the European Union, and we are recognized for our welfare state, which is the same in all Scandinavia. So this is due to free education. We have free healthcare systems. We have welfare payments when we are out of work. So all these things is needed a high tax level to cover these expenses. The country is famous for our fairy tale writer, Hans Christian Andersen, the King family, The Little Mermaid, and Lego, which I think some of you may know. The higher educational system in Denmark and in the Nordic countries, Scandinavia, is regulated by the government, meaning that it's the government deciding about the degree of structures, the number of students we're able to take into the education, teacher qualifications and examinations. So all these institutions are therefore accredited every 5th year, meaning that the quality of the education and all the paperwork around the education are checked and tested carefully. The educational system is based on a bachelor degree, which is in university colleges. Then you have bachelor degrees, Master of Science and PhD level, which is in the universities. Meaning that this structure is due to the system in Denmark itself, and then it's according to history, I may say. So this is the reason why I have all the different positions, because my research positions are primarily at the universities and at the university colleges, but the education, radiography education, is at university colleges. So Scandinavia is in the very northern part of Europe. I think most of the systems in all the countries, included in Scandinavia, is the same. So it's a structured approach. It's integrating theoretical learning with hands-on training. But the difference is that in Denmark, we have university colleges. In Finland, they have University of Applied Sciences. While in Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, they have the radiography educations placed at universities. Radiography education is taking 3.5 years to conclude or to end up becoming a radiographer. We have 120 ECTS in theory and 90 ECTS in clinical training in the hospitals. The students are together for the first 2 years, and they have 1.5 years after that for specialization, where they choose for either diagnostic radiography, radiotherapy, or nuclear medicine. They're able to work as a diagnostic radiographer even though they took the education as nuclear medicine at the end. But then they need more training when becoming a newly educated radiography in the clinical placements. So looking into what we are educating the students, I think it's quite similar across the world, actually. So we have a lot of anatomy and physiology, we have a lot of physics, we have a lot of communication and psychology, we have a lot of microbiology and hygiene, we have interdisciplinary collaboration, all the different X-ray modalities, diagnostic modalities. We have the workforce and management, research, and clinical practice. The way we educate is a mix between classical classroom teaching. We also use a lot of flipped classroom teaching. We use a lot of group work. We use portfolio. We use like written thesis they need to write. So it's a mix about everything. And it's mainly the important is that the students are the active part into their education, because they are the one that should be able to translate what they learned into like the clinical setting. So the clinical placement is right from the very beginning of the education, just to let them know what kind of a professional setting they are going into. It's organized by the UCL, so the institution, and it could be around 2.5 hours drive from the educational system institution. So it's quite a distance to drive each way for work in that period, but most of the students are then moving to that part during that half year of clinical placements. In the hospitals, we have employed clinical radiography lectures to coordinating, and we have clinical educated supervisors as we have clinical examinations. So we train at our university college. We have a building where our radiography laboratories is placed. So this is our goal of the education. So the students are able to come here to train here also outside the students' hours. They need to pass through some exam to be able to have the right color code to get into the laboratories on their own, but that will come due to the education. We have X-ray facilities, 2 different laboratories, and a mobile unit. We have a CT scanner. We have ultrasound, which is also used for educating anatomy and physiology. We have PACS system, which have a lot of patient cases anonymized in there, so that the students are able to read the referral and the description of the X-ray examination. We have a dose planning radiation therapy lab. We have a nuclear medicine lab. Then we have the newest one, that's a virtual reality, which we use quite a lot, and the students are really excited about it. So this is like for positioning, or it could be for radiation safety, or it could be all the things that could be hard to study without giving X-ray to somebody. This makes them hopefully better and easier integrated in clinical placement when they come to that stage. We have a health research department in the university colleges. So that's pretty new that the university colleges is driven research as well. And what we're doing here is a strong international profile. So we have adjunct senior lecturer Andrew England from Cork University College with us, and we have a really close collaboration with clinical practice as well, as we put in students from early on in their own education into research as well. So what we have been doing a lot is that we have been driving students' projects. The reason for driving different students' projects is to keep them motivated mostly. I will come back to that one. So the students' project does work this way that somebody is handing out to us as an institution. It could be animal X-ray, it have been forensic radiology, it have been pediatric dentist. It have also been optimization of image quality, radiation dose, or whatever it could be. So every time somebody is contacting us to say, we have a research topic, a question we need to answer, we're digging into the literature to see if there is a research gap. And if there is a research gap, we could start out with some students. But the students have to apply for certain projects, and we have to ensure that they are qualified into this kind of projects. And if they are, the reason for doing all this work is to give the students more possibilities to retain them into the education. So they can actually do it quite early in their education as well. We see some of the most talented students, they are lacking out at the end. But it's also giving new possibilities for lecturing. It strengthens the collaboration between clinical practice and the institution. It's developing radiography for patient professionals, and it's letting research becoming a natural part of the education, as my colleagues are involved in these research projects as well. At the end, I just want to say that the postgraduate educations, if they are at a Master of Science level, they are placed in the university. But if they are like courses in MR safety and CT or whatever, it could be placed at university colleges. So at the end, this was an introduction to how we do it in Scandinavia mainly. And what we normally say is think big. It's about passion. A lot of different possibilities are out there, and the students are very keen of learning. So that's great. So if you have any questions or comments for me, here's my email, and thank you for listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Helly. That was a very interesting talk. Thank you very much. We're going to move into the Middle East region now, and we have Dr. Mohammed Rawashdeh. He is a professor and associate dean of academics at Gulf Medical University, UAE, where he also chairs the Department of Medical Imaging on medical perception, diagnostic accuracy, and human performance. He has presented at major conferences, including RSNA, SPIE, MIPS, and AIR. His work has contributed to clinical guidelines and international reports. I'd like to also apologise for the technical difficulties that we experienced earlier, but please join me in welcoming Dr. Mohammed and his discussion about the Middle East. Thank you.
Everyone. My name is Mohammed Rawashdeh. I'm currently Associate Dean Academics and Chair of Department of Medical Imaging at Gulf Medical University. First of all, I would like to thank Isrrt for this invitation, and I would like to share with you our experience in clinical education for medical imaging. Before I start, we are located at Middle East. This is the Middle East, and in United Arab Emirates at Ajman Emirate in Gulf Medical University. So I will share with you our experience at Gulf Medical University, what we do for clinical education or a practicum for medical imaging. Our program is 4-year programs. We start a clinical at the beginning of year 2. We have mainly 3 clinical blocks. The first one in year 2, which is focused on mainly general X-ray. We have second block. This one focused mainly on CT, MR, ultrasound. And finally, we have the third block where we focus on nuclear medicine. We introduce nuclear medicine in addition to we repeat general X-ray, CT, and MRI. In the final semester, which is semester 8, we don't have any theoretical course. We have 6 months clinical training on clinical insight. So student required only to provide to go for clinical and to do a small research component or a capstone. So we start the clinical with allocation. We assign students to public and private hospitals. We provide supervision, direct supervision, and semi-direct supervision from clinical university clinical staff, in addition to clinical supervisors in the clinical site. And we assess student performance integrated in the hospital. We have a clinical team. As a program director, I am with the clinical team. In addition, we have clinical coordinator. We have a clinical faculty who's a radiologist to be a clinical educator, and we have a preceptor to follow up to the student and make sure clinical site as we expected. And all of them are eligible to work on the hospitals. When we decided to send a student for a certain clinical site, either we contact the clinical site or the clinical site contact us showing interest of supervising a student. Then we provide, we go for a clinical visits to see what type of modalities. We ask the clinical site to fill a form or sheet or a survey about certain information to make sure to assess the clinical site and to make sure the clinical site as we expected. Then we decide accordingly whether to accept this clinical site as a clinical site for the university or to send an apology letter. This is type of information we ask the clinical site to provide. We ask the student to the clinical site to tell us about who's the chief radiographer, maximum capacity for the student, and whether the clinical site suitable for second, third, or fourth years, and what type of modalities available within the clinical site. And accordingly, as I just mentioned, we decide whether to send our student for that clinical site or not, and if yes, to decide whether we will send second year student, third year student, or fourth year student. Before we send the student to the clinical site, we provide orientation for the supervisor. At different levels. We provide what we call the introductory level, to introduce a student supervisor to the clinical education, and we have intermediate level about, for example, working with a hard student or challenging student, and we have more advanced workshops for supervisors, like becoming a workplace a clinical education champion, etc., etc. So we provide orientation for the supervisors. And also we have 2 manuals, one for the student, what we call student clinical education manual, where students they can see what objectives we need them to achieve at certain block or practicum, and how they will be assessed. And we have another manual for supervisors, where they can see how to assess a student, what to do if things went wrong, who to contact from the university if they need to contact us. So we have two manuals for clinical sites. We provide training for X-rays, special procedures, like sometimes for fluoroscopy, sometimes for needles. So it's more specialized procedure, CT scan, MRI, ultrasound, and we give a little bit about the nuclear medicine. And in the final semester, as I mentioned, it's just we don't have any theoretical courses in semester 8. It's only clinical. Student will be posted in different modalities, in everything: CT scan, general X-ray, MRI. So just to wrap up everything in the final semester. In addition, we ask a student to write a research or a capstone during that semester. Before we send the student to clinical site, we provide a clinical orientation to clinical practicum. We provide what we expect from them, how we assess them, and again, for students themselves, if things went wrong, who to contact or what to do. So we provide orientation before sending our student to the clinical site. Also, before we allocate a student to the clinical site, we ask them to fill something we called it objective for clinical placement. In this objective, we ask each student to provide 3 objectives they want to achieve and strategies to achieve these objectives. And we ask a clinical supervisor and a student both to sign. So these objectives should be negotiated between student and the supervisor. And at the end of the semester, we ask the student to reflect on achieving these objectives. And again, a student and supervisor need to sign. So this is as a term of to make it more structured clinical training. In addition, it's a feedback for us at the university. So when we see these objectives at the end, we can see how it can give us indication about how things went in the clinical. And we provide some simulation to make a student ready for a clinical. For example, here we have some quality control simulation, positioning simulation, which is just before the relocation student to the clinical site, and here CT simulation. So we try to prepare the student before sending them to the clinical sites. And inside the clinical site, faculty from the university provide certain workshops. For example, here I think musculoskeletal workshop for the students in ultrasound. And as we mentioned in clinic, we provide also quality control training or workshop inside the clinical placement. So we in certain time or certain weeks, we have certain activities, either staff from the university or from the hospital provide the workshop. So this is like on-site training from the hospitals. In our hospitals, we have different assessment we used in our clinical site. We start, which is what I want to focus on here, formative assessment, because each semester we have 16 weeks. In week 7, we have formative assessment, which is exactly similar to the end semester examination. Our objective from that formative assessment is to make sure the students know how they perform And for us, we can assist the clinical side, how things going in the clinical side at early stage, because we don't want to leave the student toward the end and we identify the problems. We have a formative assessment in week 7. In addition, we have case presentation, assignment, case study, portfolio, OSCE, and we have a clinical competency. It's not an assessment, but we take it as a form of assessment and logbook and activity sheet in addition to the end of semester examination. All this maybe in one clinical, or they will see at least, for example, case presentation in one of the practicums in their study. So here is the form of formative assessment. So it's to provide a feedback to let the student identify the area that need to be improved or to be improved. As you can see here, we can. This is example of a formative assessment we provide. We give a student whether it's excellent, good, or they need to improve. And we have this remark from the supervisor, and we ask the student, him or herself, also to provide a feedback, as you can see here. Student, they have to fill logbook about cases, number of cases they have seen, and student, they have to fill weekly activity sheet where they can write in details about certain cases they have. So, for example, here, X-ray, MRI, we have this PET, CT scan, and this is CT abdomen. So the student can fill about clinical history, about preparation, about technical factor, and finding from the case. Also, a student at one of the clinical practicums, either 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they have to write assignment. So it's for to encourage a student to synthesize theoretical construct with from a clinical experience. So a student need to write assignment. Also, we ask a student at one of the clinical to do case presentation, to build communication and the presentation skills to show a confidence and the professional readiness. So this is an example of student presentation. Also, we ask a student to provide case report again. For example, how we structure it in one semester, they have to provide assignment. In one semester, they have to provide a case report, one presentation. So we have one component we can modify usually in the clinical. So this is a case report, which is our objective to develop critical thinking and analytical skills by assessing patient details. So this is an example of the case report from one of our students. And toward the final years, all the students should provide competencies. We assess student competencies at certain procedures, and a student should receive yes in every category, whether they identify the patient properly, whether they all things. If anything received no, this will be counted as performed, and the student need to redo the competency again. And again, student and supervisor need to sign. At the end of semester, we have OSCE, which is objective structure clinical examination, which is to provide a more structured assessment for the student regarding whether their clinical training. Also, we provide student in this. We don't have a summer in our study plan, so we provide opportunity for the student, what we call it summer elective training, where a student can have a clinical practicum in our hospital, or sometimes we send them abroad or to other Emirates, or so to gain some extra clinical training. When a student choose to have a clinical in our site, we ask the student about his or her interest. For example, CT scan or MRI. We provide extra training in the summer as elective training, and we have end semester clinical examination to assess the clinical student clinical performance by following a complete case from calling the patient until sending the patient off. We have rubric, as you can see here. We follow for the assessment. We have portfolio, or we ask a student to fill a portfolio about knowledge, skills, and attitude gained, and provide evidences of gaining these activities or knowledge or thing. And also we ask a student to reflect on what they learn. For example, when they did this basic life support course, the student that need to provide the certificate in addition to that to provide a reflection on learning. So we ask a student to fill portfolio for the and this portfolio for the 3 or 4 years they can fill and add as they go. As I mentioned, part of a clinical at the semester 8, we have research. A student need to write a research, and sometimes they present the research, as you can see here, as a poster. Sometimes as an oral presentation, as we have at the end of semester 8, what we called it medical imaging research day, where all students present their research after the final, and to share their research with other colleagues and supervisors. At the end of the semester, we ask students to provide feedback either by direct meeting, where they can tell us about their experience, what they did like, and the area need to improve. In addition to that, we have 2 types of surveys. One general survey from quality assurance department, this is general for all courses, theoretical and clinical. This student need to fill. In addition to that, we have our own survey to the department, where students need to give us a feedback. It's specific for clinical. For example, student need to show the orientation I received was adequate. I have the opportunity to negotiate my learning need with my supervisor. During my placement, my supervisor expectation were clear and reasonable. So it's a term of a feedback to us, to the university, to assess the clinical site and supervisors and preceptors. So it's a term of the feedback we gain. So this is I think there is a room for question at the end. I'm happy to answer any question, and I would like to thank you for listening and for your time. Thank you very much, and again I would like to thank for this invitation.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed, for a very comprehensive talk on the clinical education within the Middle East. We're going to move on to the UK and Europe now, and we are joined today by Dr. Carolina Palimarki-Parkey. She's a principal lecturer at Oslo University of Applied Sciences and a postdoctoral researcher at the Oulu University. Carolina aims to promote the development of the radiography science education and research, especially through digital means. She is the chair of both the EFRS Educational Wing Management Team and the Finnish Radiography Research Society. Through postdoctoral research, Carolina has focused on the digital interventions used for patients coming to medical imaging and for radiographer students. She has years of experience in educating and supervising radiography students. She has participated in organising several scientific conferences and serves as a peer reviewer for multiple scientific journals. In her free time, Carolina can be found either at the horse riding arena, on a running trail, or being active with her family. Welcome, Carolina, and thank you for your talk.
Hi everyone. First, I want to thank for the kind invitation to give this presentation. My name is Karoliina Paalimäki-Paakki. I'm a radiographer and a principal lecturer in Oulu University of Applied Sciences in Finland. I'm also a postdoctoral researcher in Oulu University. I serve as a chair of European Federation of Radiographer Societies, EFRS, Educational Wing Management Team. I will provide an overview of clinical radiography education in Europe. I do not have any conflict of interest. Really quickly about the higher education in Europe. Each country has its own nationally governed higher education system, but we all are part of EHEA. The Standardized European Qualifications Framework, EQF, helps compare the qualifications across European countries. It has 8 levels. For example, level 6 is bachelor degree level, level 7 is master's degree level, and level 8 is doctorate level. The scope of qualification is measured in European Credit Transfer and Accumulation System, ECTS, where 60 ECTS are equivalent for a full year of study. The data here is from EFRS surveys during 2023 and 24, where 27 educational institutions participated. First of all, the areas of professional practice that are included into the curricula. 78% are combined courses with medical imaging, radiotherapy, and nuclear medicine included. On educational level, 82% are at EQF level 6, which means bachelor level, and 22% of the respondents are at EQF level 5. The number of credits in ECTS varies. The majority of the responding universities, with 44%, had 180 ECTS, 26% had 240 ECTS, and 15% had 210 ECTS. Also, the duration of the education varies, with 3 years, 52%, 4 years, 22%, and 3.5 years, 15%. Here are examples from Finland, where 6 universities of applied sciences offer radiography and radiation therapy program across the country. We all have 210 ECTS within 3.5 years at bachelor level. In these EFRS surveys, the participants were asked how much practical training their students have in total, including simulation and hospital. You can see that the numbers varied quite a lot in Europe. 1 ECTS equals for average to 27 hours. 5 institutions here in Belgium, Denmark, Estonia, Malta, and Netherlands had more than 60 weeks clinical training in total, whereas 3 educational institutions stated that they have only 6.7 to 13.3 weeks total amount of training. For example, in my university, the total amount of training during 3.5 years is 50.7 weeks in total. EFRS also asked whether educational institutions are equipped with clinical labs. 26 out of 27 are, and the simulation facilities available are quite extensive. For example, PAC stations, ultrasound scanners, and digital radiography rooms are really common. Also, virtual and remote simulations are integrated into the education in few universities. In these IFRS surveys, the participants were also asked how much practical training their students have in hospitals, excluding the simulation. Again, there's a lot of variation. In opposite ends, 3 institutions here, Denmark, France, and 1 in UK, have 15 to 60 weeks of clinical training in hospitals, and 1 single institution indicated that they allocated only 14 to 20 weeks for practical training. Post-qualification requirements for this institution may be different to the other institution participating in this survey, or the significant proportion of practical training might be completed following the qualification. And for example, in my university, again, during 3.5 years, students are doing 46.7 weeks in clinical practice. These were not asked in European level, but here are the examples from my university. The amount of weeks that students are on placement in clinical environment within modalities and during which study year the placement can happen. These all are mandatory for our students, and with free choice, they can increase the amount of certain their choice of practical training. You will find more examples from these 2 articles, and the data and information on next slides are from the second article listed here, so this one. On earlier IFRS surveys, there were questions about clinical supervisors, and then the majority of the respondents, 27 institutions again, indicated that there is a dedicated clinical practice supervisor available at all their clinical placement sites. And typically 1 to 3 students are supervised by an individual person. In some countries, clinical practice supervisors are responsible for teaching, assessment, and placement, and in other, they provide direct supervision of the student alongside performing day-to-day clinical radiographic examinations. Their posts are paid mainly by the hospitals and in some cases by the educational institutions. The majority of the institutions have a formal agreement with clinical sites, and nearly half of the institutions indicated that there was a financial payment made to the clinical site. Common requirements for clinical practice supervisors are to teach students, monitor their progress, provide feedback to them and to education providers, and to complete placement-related paperwork. If the clinical practice supervisors were provided any training for their post, training was provided by teaching staff from the educational institutions in majority of the cases, or by clinical staff, or by academic or external clinical practice supervision courses. 44% stated that the training was mandatory for all clinical practice supervisors. And here is, finally, there is one example. This figure illustrates the range of topics that are commonly included in a clinical supervisory training programs. A wide spectrum of training opportunities for clinical practice is desirable in order to reflect changing needs of the student, for example, support plans for those identified as having special education needs, such as dyslexia, other disabilities, and indeed personal or social difficulties. You will find more information on this topic around Europe, for example, from these 2 articles. Thank you. You can contact me in case you have any questions after this webinar through, for example, through my email. Thanks.
Many thanks for that, Dr. Carolina. That was a very, very interesting look at Europe and how each of the countries match up with one another. We're going to move on to the Americas next, and we are joined today by Dr. Christy Moore. So Dr. Christy Moore is a chair and professor of the Department of Radiologic Sciences and interim director of the Nuclear Medicine Technology program at the University of Mississippi Medical Center School of Health-Related Professions in Jackson, Mississippi, USA. She holds a faculty role in UMMC's School of Medicine. A nationally recognized speaker and educator, Dr. Moore presents on topics including volunteerism, professional development, and medical imaging innovation. Her accolades include UMMC Alumni of the Year in 2025, Aunt Minnie's Most Effective Radiologic Sciences Educator in 2022, and 2 ASRT Distinguished Author Awards. An active member of the Isrrt, ASRT, and Mississippi Society of Radiologic Technologists, which is the MSRT. She currently serves as the ASRT's council member to the Isrrt and has held national and state leadership positions, including chair and president of both the ASRT and the MSRT board of directors. Dr. Moore is also a mentor, keynote speaker, textbook contributor, and advocate for advancing the radiologic sciences profession. Thank you, Dr. Moore, for giving us your presentation.
It is such an honor to be here, and I'd like to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to the Isrrt for the opportunity to represent the Americas and to share a brief overview of the current state of clinical education in our region. I'm Christy Moore, and I serve as chair and professor for the Department of Radiologic Sciences at the School of Health-Related Professions at the University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson, Mississippi, which is in the United States of America. And so I wanted to state that the content of this presentation reflects my personal experiences and knowledge of the clinical education requirements, and the views expressed are solely my own. While representing the broader Americas, which consist of North America, to include Canada and the United States of America, Central America, and South America, the primary focus of this presentation will be on clinical education practices within the United States. Radiography education across the Americas shows a range of practices, from structured, nationally coordinated systems to more varied models. In the United States, radiography programs are formalized, and they follow a consistent pathway that includes academic preparation, clinical education, and credentialing. Our programs prepare students to take the American Registry of Radiologic Technologists, ARRT certification exam. This is the gold standard for professional entry. And many U.S. programs are accredited by the Joint Review Committee on Education in Radiologic Technology, which is the JRC-ERT, to ensure educational quality. But there are other programs not accredited by JRC-ERT, and they can still qualify their students for the ART exam through alternative pathways, such as through regional accreditation and adherence to ARRT's recognized curriculum standards. I do want to speak about programmatic accreditation with the JRC-ERT. For more than 5 decades, they have been the cornerstone of quality assurance in radiologic science education. As of May 2024, the JRC-ERT accredits over 700 radiography, radiation therapy, magnetic resonance, and medical dosimetry educational programs in the United States, District of Columbia, and Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, ensuring that students receive a consistent, high-quality education regardless of their location or program type. It's important to note that Alaska is the only state without a JRC-ERT accredited program, highlighting a potential area for growth and outreach. Accredited programs can be housed in traditional colleges, private entities, and even healthcare facilities, and this just offers students flexibility and accessibility. JRC-ERT holds dual recognition from both the U.S. Department of Education and the Council for Higher Education Accreditation, or CHIA. This solidifies its credibility and national standing. JRC-ERT remains the only recognized agency authorized to accredit radiologic science programs in both traditional and online formats, and it's essential in today's evolving educational landscape. At its core, the mission of JRC-ERT is to elevate academic and professional standards in our field, directly contributing to safer, higher quality patient care. Radiography education in the United States typically follows either a 2-year associate or 4-year bachelor's degree format, both designed to balance didactic and clinical training. Clinical education is not delayed until the end of the program. Most students enter their clinical settings within the first semester or shortly after completing an initial foundational phase. Rather than a single block of clinical training, students are engaged in ongoing clinical rotations throughout their entire program, progressively increasing in complexity. Clinical sites are varied and they include general radiography, trauma, mobile, OR suites, fluoroscopy, pediatric hospitals, and outpatient imaging centers. This variety is going to ensure that our students gain real-world exposure, build competency in different modalities, and work with a variety of patient demographics that will prepare them for full-scope clinical practice after graduation. Academic programs assign clinical preceptors to support radiography students on site, and these individuals play a critical role in bridging the gap between the academic learning and hands-on experience. Their responsibilities go well beyond supervision. They orient students to site protocols, they monitor clinical skills and professionalism, they evaluate students using structured competency tools, and the list just goes on and on. These clinical preceptors are ARRT certified technologists who have received additional preparation in teaching or mentorship, and this ensures that they're equipped to support learning and assessment of our students. Clinical preceptors maintain a strong communication with the academic faculty to ensure consistent expectation, progression tracking, and intervention if needed. According to JRC-ERT standards, all accredited programs must ensure students comply with strict direct and indirect supervision policies during clinical hours. Students must observe the technologist performing the procedure before they're able to perform that same procedure under direct supervision. When the student has achieved competency of the procedure, then they're allowed to perform it under indirect supervision. Clinical placement begins with introductory experiences for the first year, often 2 days per week in some programs, and that may focus on core competencies like patient communication and basic positioning. In the second year, students transition into potential advanced clinical settings that may include trauma rooms and OR suites, mobile imaging. Usually these are 3 to 4 days per week for those students. Many programs also use the summer semester for concentrated clinical immersion, where the student may be in the clinical setting even more for the week. And clinical placement is aligned with ARRT task inventory and clinical competency requirements. So you could say that students spend about 40% of their clinical time in year 1 focusing on the basics of imaging and patient care, where year 2 comprises about 60%, where students take on more advanced procedures and gain independence. Students are not left on their own. They're supported by faculty, clinical preceptors, and staff technologists. Our clinical coordinators in the programs monitor progress and maintain close communication between the program and the clinical sites. Before entering clinicals, students typically go through simulated practice labs to build baseline confidence and skills. And clinical environments can be emotionally and physically taxing, so schools increasingly provide mental health resources, support groups, and tools for self-care and time management for students. Honest feedback, defined expectations, and recognition of their progress are essential to student success. So again, JRC-ERT sets the educational framework for program quality and consistency, and clinical education must be directly supervised until the student is proven competent. A focus is placed on progressive responsibility and ensuring students aren't left unsupervised. And the ARRT defines the minimum competency standards for certification. You see on the left, eligibility for the ART exam requires that a student graduates from an ARRT recognized program and that they complete all of their clinical and didactic requirements. Students have to complete a detailed competency log that's verified by the program director, and this ensures that technologists entering the workforce have proven skills for a wide variety of imaging scenarios. On the right side of the slide, you see the checklist of those documented clinical competencies. Our students have to get a variety of general patient care procedures, and then also 37 mandatory imaging procedures and 15 elective procedures to be eligible for the ART certification exam. And the ART sets these clinical competency standards to ensure that all candidates are not only knowledgeable, but also clinically capable. These competencies focus on a candidate's ability to perform key procedures accurately, independently, and on a consistent basis. It's not enough to just observe or assist. Students must demonstrate full responsibility for the procedure as part of their formal education. These hands-on experiences are essential and complement the cognitive skills evaluated on the certification exam. Together, clinical competency and exam performance confirm that a graduate's ready for safe, effective practice in any clinical environment. So why does it matter? Well, JRC-ERT ensures a structured quality education, and ARRT ensures that our graduates are ready for professional practice. So together, these just are going to safeguard patient care and professional standards in radiologic technology. So JRC-ERT is the only CHIA-recognized specialty accreditor for radiography programs. But like I'd said, its accreditation is not mandatory for ARRT eligibility. Programs can be regionally accredited and still qualify students for the ART exam. Most submit detailed documentation proving they cover all required educational and clinical competency. The ART then reviews those submissions to ensure that the students are being prepared to the same standard as those from JRC-ERT programs. Cost or administrative burden may deter smaller and developing programs from seeking JRC-ERT accreditation. Some programs are embedded within broader health science departments, and they don't operate as standalone imaging programs. So accreditation alternatives still uphold rigorous quality assurance, just through different mechanisms. Regardless of the accreditation pathway, all students must demonstrate competence through the same ARRT standards. This ensures a uniform professional baseline across the United States for certified radiographers. So clinical education in the United States follows a competency-based framework aligned with ARRT standards. Students must demonstrate proficiency, not just complete the hours. While JRC-ERT sets the gold standard for program accreditation, ART does allow alternative pathways, ensuring flexibility without compromising quality. Clinical education is adapting through simulation, virtual tools, and new partnerships, helping programs scale and maintain standards amid workforce shortages. A strong alliance between academic institutions and clinical sites ensures that students receive consistent, high-quality experience. This cooperation is foundational to our program success and patient safety. As student demand grows and imaging evolves, continuing to innovate while upholding rigorous standards will help shape the next generation of radiographers. Thank you for your attention and listening. It truly was an honor to share clinical experience within the United States of America.
Thank you for that, Dr. Christie. Certainly a very different program, I think, than what other countries are running themselves. Our final speaker today is going to be talking about the African region, and that is a good friend of mine, Mr. Stephen McColomer. Stephen is a radiography scientist who serves as a radiology and imaging supervisor at Ocean Road Cancer Institute and a part-time lecturer at the Muhimbili University of Health and Allied Sciences in the School of Radiography. He holds a Master's of Technology in Radiography from the University of Johannesburg. Mr. McColomer is a former Isrrt Coordinator for Public Relations, a TARA President and Tanzania Council Member to the Isrrt. He currently serves with Isrrt as a Coordinator for Education for the Africans. He is also a loyal servant of the WRETF as a lead ambassador. His engagement in academia saw being an external supervisor and examiner for quite a period at the Catholic University of Health and Allied Sciences. He is a lover of ethical but standardized quality radiography practice and believes that there is a room for growth professionally and intellectually as far as radiography is concerned. Thank you very much, Stephen, for giving us a presentation on the African region.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all professionals around the world. I'm Stephen Samson Koloma, a radiology and imaging supervisor at Ocean Cancer Institute, serving as Isrrt coordinator for education for the African, as well as lead ambassador for World Radiographic Education Trust Foundation. I'm privileged today to render to you a topic on radiographic clinical education, African perspective. Radiography education in Africa has evolved significantly over past century and see itself producing top lecturers in top universities around the globe and top researchers who published a lot of research in top journals across. And it is shaped by healthcare needs in African settings, as well as socioeconomic development that have been seen in our African countries. Radiography education started in 1900 to 1950s through colonial medical services, and it was informally driven, and largely people were trained on the job. Formal education started in 1960s after many countries have claimed their independence, where South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and Egypt be the pioneering countries, and they were using mostly British-based curricula. South Africa played a role in establishing a number of diploma and degree programs earlier than many African countries, as well as Nigeria, who saw first establish their own regulatory body that regulates radiographers in 1987. The African radiographers to be trained first came from South Africa. The two of them who received training in the UK and the US between 1920 and 1922, where in 1930, the British Society of Radiographers started training of radiographers in South Africa, where they established their branch. Nigeria also saw its first hospital with the X-ray in 1913, and in 1950, about 12 hospitals were doing X-rays, and they had X-ray unity in their hospitals. But a native radiographer was informally trained in 1922 and received the formal education, excuse me, in 1943, which was acquired from Leeds University in UK. Overview of radiography education in Africa. See a program taught from certificate until postgraduate programs. Certificate being 2 years program, 3 years program diploma, and 3 to 5 years degree, depending on the setting of the country, and at least 2 years for postgraduate. Also, some of these universities and countries graduate must do 1 year internship before licensure, where some don't. And all the students have access to all modalities. However, some of the countries restrict the radiographer at diploma level to be taught ultrasound of the small part and specialized ultrasound like Doppler, breast ultrasound, thyroid, and alike. But also our students have access to examine real patients as well as doing simulation during the course of their studies. We have limited specialty training, like training on specific modalities such as CT scan, MRI is limited. Majority of our programs teach general knowledge of everything. 86% of institutions in Africa are owned by government. They are public, where only 14% are owned by private and private public partnership, where 7% of students have access to modern equipment, and 18 to 150 students are recruited in our institution per institution every year, where by faculty member, about 70% of them are master's holders. In terms of geographical and institutional diversity, most of the institutions are based on cities, and the majority of countries have one or two universities only teaching radiography. But the leading countries are South Africa and Nigeria, where Nigeria have at least 15 universities teaching radiography, while about 8 and above South Africa university teaching radiography program. And in terms of establishment, the South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Egypt, and Zambia, these countries have got well-established programs. The list has not been made depending on strength, but they are randomly kept. Also, we teach general radiography, radiotherapy, sonography, nuclear medicine, as well as we have hybrid programs where students are taught different aspects like all radiography, radiotherapy, sonography, and nuclear medicine. After graduation, they can work in any of the portfolio at workplace. So we also embed classroom and clinical attachment throughout the program. Language instruction depends on the country language, and English, French, Arabic, and Portuguese are leading languages of instruction in our universities. How is this practiced? We integrate with the curriculum, where fundamental knowledge is given through lectures, tutorials, and seminars. Also, integration of class and rotation. Some of the countries, they start rotation of students to X-ray departments or radio department from first year. Like in Tanzania, they start in second semester while they're in first year for diploma, and second years for degrees. But also, students are brought to both public and private hospitals. Also, we have affiliated teaching hospitals as well as centers. Students are supervised by qualified radiographers, and some institutions appoint clinical tutors and clinical coordinators, whereby approach of learning is direct observation, especially for junior students, hands-on practice under supervision of the clinical radiographers, case-based learning, peer learning, and group discussion, as well as simulation. We evaluate students using competence checklists, clinical logbooks, practical exams, and objective structured questions, as well as receiving feedbacks from the clinical staff and clinical supervisors. Challenges. Overburdened clinical sites, heavy and high patient volume. Sometimes radiographers fail to teach students well in rush of finishing the patients. Limited and shortage of teaching staff, limited number of radiographers to supervise the students in clinical areas, and zeal to teach. Some of these people are not positive to teach radiographers. They only do because they are supposed to do the job. Or lack of capacity building initiatives, where there's scarce knowledge of supervising, coaching, and mentoring students. Also, poor student equipment ratio, lack of well-equipped simulation laboratories, curriculum mismatch, where you find there's no link between academic and clinical expectation, but also the curriculum is different within the same country, but every institution have its own curriculum. Leave the rest, the discrepancies that we have in Africa. Also, language barrier, as I said, one, because we are training using a different language, there's no common language of instruction in Africa, but also because we teach in a certain language, like in Tanzania, we teach in English, but when students go to the clinical areas and the radiographers that working at the hospital, they use Swahili because a majority of clients are speaking native Swahili language. So this is the situation across Africa. You find most of the people are speaking native languages. Lack of strong regional body of professionals and academia. We don't have anybody that unite teaching radiographers across the region to discuss important issues pertaining fate of radiography education. Also, nomenclature. We find every institution have its own program name. So what to do? We need to look for a common agenda, harmonize the training standard, develop competence-based curricula tailored to African needs, engage exchange programs, improve recruitment and retention of qualified academic and clinical staff, offer developmental opportunities to further their studies, and engage strong capacity building in terms of research and innovation, but also to increase accessibility, inclusion, and technology. We encourage African countries to establish schools in underdeserved areas. Those countries that don't train, they need to come up with the institutions, but also those who are training lower cadre to improve and go to higher cadres, certificates to go to degrees, and think of establishing masters and postgraduate program, but also expand e-learning platforms between ourselves and improve our collaborations among African universities. In summary, looking at African population, Africa stands a big chance to be world's most feed industry. Africa is enough to settle radiography workforce gap worldwide. Radiography education in Africa holds immense potential with the targeted investment, visionary leadership, and collective effort. We can build a world-class system that produces competent, compassionate, and innovative radiographers. If any one of us think of investing in radiography education, then Africa is a place of a choice. It's still virgin and most fruitful land to invest. Thank you, and I wish you well as we continue to serve the community in the world.
Thank you, Stephen, for that. I really like to see how much Africa is advancing, I think, when it comes to clinical education and that. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Now we get to the Q&A part, and I'd like to invite all of our speakers to just turn your cameras on so that the audience can see you. Thank you all very much for taking the time to give us your educational perspectives on clinical education and that. I really do appreciate the time that you've taken to join today and to speak with us as well. There have been a lot of questions that have popped up, which some of you have noted, I think, throughout this. So I'm going to try to get through some of them quickly. And for those questions that I do miss, I do apologise in advance to the audience. I have noted that there was a comment at the very beginning about the number of years of radiography education and I think we've noticed in previous studies that it's actually highly variable across the globe. There's some countries that run as little as 2-year courses and other countries that run as large as 5-year courses as well. I've also noted as well that the education and the scope of practice of the profession is also highly variable, and even within a certain continent, that would actually be the case as well. And that makes it really, really hard, I think, when it comes to universal professional identity of the profession of radiography. But it's also hard for those who want to be able to travel to other countries to practice. And there have been a few questions that have come through from the audience who have actually asked about working in areas such as the UK and the US and things like that. And so for those people that have actually asked those questions, I do encourage you to look on the websites of the professional societies in those countries, because they will be able to provide that information for you. I have a question for all of you to begin with, all right? And this is related to clinical placement time. So Greg talked a lot about the quality of clinical placement as well. And there's also noted that there's a big variety in the placement weeks, particularly across the European region, I think I noted as well. And we all see that there's a big benefit and there's a big variation of clinical placement time in that. And it's really, really hard to be able to achieve that with the supply and demand in terms of how many students are required to go out on clinical placement, how many clinical placements there are available to teach them. And we're not just talking about just teaching them, we're talking about the high quality teaching that we can get. How do you think we can get around the fact that sometimes there's just not enough place for the students, but we know that the students actually need that clinical placement? Anyone can jump in to answer that question. Nobody wants to answer, though. I have a follow-up question then. My follow-up question is, because this is another source of contention, I think, at the moment, can simulation be a good replacement for clinical education on a clinical placement site?
If you let me please to share my opinion, I think simulation can help but cannot replace, because for our example, we provide this simulation as a preclinical lab to prepare students for clinical, but at the end they need to communicate with the patient to gather information from the patient, which I think it can help, but I don't think so it can replace. Maybe it can reduce we can use it for some time if we have, like as you mentioned, we have many students and less clinical side. But I from my opinion, I don't think so. It's a replacement. It's a can support.
Thank you, Mohammed. Hallie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Mohammed that it's a great way of training, but it can't replace the interaction with the patient as well. So what we have a lot in Scandinavia is the relation to the patient is a key issue in radiography for us. So being a really good technician is also to be good in patient communication, because then you have the overview to become a good technical radiographer. But at the same time, you need to be a good technician and technical skilled to be able to take care of the patient. So this interaction is missing in simulation, but it can be a good starting point to put on the students better before they go out in clinical practice at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Carolina?
Yeah, I agree with Hel and Mohammed that the simulation can help to prepare students for the actual clinical placement, but it can't be a replacement. I think that students are more ready to go there to the clinical sites, and they are more ready to jump to the work at the first day when they have done things in simulation beforehand. And one example from Finland is that when we are thinking about the shortage of placements, we've come up with the idea that we try to increase the number of students at the placement so that they are running not independently, but together. They are learning from each other. They are maybe at some point they might be at different phases, so that maybe second year student and third year students are there together, and the third year student is like teaching the second year student. Or it can be so that they are both in the same phase and they have dedicated tasks that they should run together. So I think that has been in Finland, that has given some flexibility to the placement shortage.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing. We've got to think about, be innovative, I think, in terms of thinking about different ways that we can do this as well. Greg.
Thanks, Steve. I agree with the rest of the comments about simulation. Certainly there's a place for it, but it simply just cannot replace communication with the student, with the patients, and the sort of complexity of patients we get somewhere in a tertiary hospital like ours. There's absolutely no way you can simulate it. To answer your original question, which was about quality of placement, I think Christy answered it from the States the best. I think there's no point just doing the hours. It's not just about ticking the hours. You have to come out with the skills and abilities to be a competent and capable radiographer. Because I think a lot of people forget, our graduates are out there with ionizing radiation and so forth. So we have to be safe practitioners out protecting the public. So it's not just about competing the hours. It's about having that quality embedded within the placement as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. Thank you. Christy.
So simulation, I think, does play a critical role for our students because it allows them to make mistakes without any risk. It allows them to improve their overall preparedness for clinical practice. But I agree with everybody else. It doesn't replace those skills that they're actually getting with the patient themselves. For the ARRT exam, students have to perform a specific number of competencies that I had spoken about on actual patients. But we do know that there are some procedures that are kind of few and far between that we're seeing in the clinical sites. So the ART does allow limited number of simulated exams to be able to check off and count as those competencies. However, that still has to be, a radiologic technologist has to approve that, and that would be the clinical coordinator, the program director. So, there are strict guidelines for those simulations.
Thanks, Christy. And Stephen.
Thank you. I just want to add from where my colleagues have just shared, but to just say, simulation can be used as a basic key and a foundational platform to help students grasp only the basics of how to go about radiography. But, if you're using models or fellow students, sometimes your fellow student can exaggerate. Maybe if you are teaching them about positioning, and you find when they try to position, somebody can, because they have preconceived information of what his position is, he can try to position himself and ruin everything. But when you take a student to really practice, it really gives him a chance to intervene in terms of difficult patients, patients who are cooperative, things like communication and how to explain, to define the clinical information. So practice remains important, even though we can improve simulation to any level. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. It looks like we've got a very a consensus across the board there, I think, as to the value of simulation, but not the replacement, I guess, of that clinical education. Greg, I just want to move on to your talk to begin with. And you talked a lot about some places not having a dedicated clinical educators. And I know that some countries have specifically trained student supervisors. And you know, in Australia, we do have that concept a little bit where we can train student supervisors, but obviously that's not a mandatory thing. A question came through from Alona Lavender, which was, do most clinical educators deal with students, or are qualified staff included in the job description for clinical educators? Because where she works, clinical educators at a large tertiary centre, the focus tends to be on qualified staff as opposed to on the students themselves.
Yeah, I did read that question, Steve. 100% correct that especially in a teaching hospital or a tertiary hospital, it is in everybody's role description that you know, educating and supervising students is part of the job. We take anywhere from 50 to 60 students throughout a calendar year, and it's impossible for one person as a clinical educator to be there for every single person every single day. So it takes a village to raise a child, as they say. So it absolutely, yes, it takes one person to oversee everything. So as the go-to person, I mean, we hopefully all remember as clinical educators, your first clinical or your second clinical placement, they are nerve-wracking things. So to be able to have someone that you can latch onto, someone that is your go-to, someone who will look after you, someone who's got your back, is super critical. And unfortunately, it's becoming quite common where there's some students have got no one really to latch onto or to go to as their first port of call on the first day. And that can be quite stressful clinical placement as it is, and having that to deal with initially makes it even more difficult for a student. And how can you have a harmonious clinical placement if you have no one to really guide you along the way? So I think clinical educator role is undervalued at times, and I'd like to see them embedded in just about every place that takes on the responsibility of training clinical students.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you very much, Greg. Hal, just moving on to you, I've got two questions for you. The first one is, given that Lego is from Denmark, do you actually get special access to medical imaging related Lego?
So special acts.
As in, do they send you Lego that has a picture, or where you can actually build medical imaging equipment with it?
No, they have made an MRI scanner, so maybe that's the reason why the question is coming up. So they made an MRI scanner which have been used in research studies to interact with pediatric patients and to explain to them what they should go through and to play all this setting. So we have been involved in that one. Actually, Lego is just 1 hour away from our hospital here. So we are the pediatric hospital for their employees as well. So they're really keen on collaborating, and they are really keen on keeping the design university into it as well, which is also taking a lot of international students.
Yeah, thank you.
But they're not sending, unfortunately, they're not getting Lego in our...
That's very unfortunate. That was actually my question, because I was genuinely curious about it. So it would be nice to actually get some. Another question, though, do you find that following because you said that your course structure that you have set up is that you have 2 years as common across the 3 streams, and then you specialize for the final 1.5 years. Do you find that 1.5 years is enough time for that specialization, or do you think that should actually be brought forward a little bit more?
No. I think if you ask me and all my colleagues at the university college, then they will agree on that this is really limited time. So also given the case that you can go out being specialized in nuclear medicine, but having a job in diagnostic radiography afterwards. So there's no rules for how to be a clinical radiographer at the end, but this is a governmental decision. So that's just how it is at the moment. But we're working on changing it. Also, given that for one class, we have like 50 students, and it's only like 10 going in radiotherapy, 10 going in nuclear medicine, rest is diagnostic radiography, which was the basic of the education history-based. So it's not enough time at all.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to Mohammed. Mohammed, I really liked that the concept of the surveys that you actually had after the clinical placement that were given to the students. I think that's really good to evaluate the quality of the placement that the student is actually getting and whether they're actually getting what they need when they're out on clinical placement, because I think that's a very, very important part about it as well. You also noted that you had the manual, I think, for the clinical tutors and for the supervisors as well. Is there any other training other than giving them the manual for the supervisors before they have students coming out to them?
Actually, we provide the type of structure or workshops at the 3 levels. So we have an introduction for everyone who will be involved in training a student. We have intermediate, and we have for someone who would like to be a clinical educator. We provide so at the beginning just regulation, how to deal with the patient. Later, how to do some more medical education terms. So we provide the clinical site with the clinical. Usually we invite our clinical supervisor to on campus or between semester, and we provide these type of workshops to build capacity of the workshops, and we share with them what our expectation and mainly how to assess the student, because sometimes they are involved in the assessment. We try to make as assessment as less subjective as we can. That's why we try to provide more workshops for the clinical educator or supervisors.
Thank you very much. This is not mandatory training though, right?
It's not mandatory. We try to encourage. We try to encourage them to come to our campus to build. Actually, we have another purpose for this. We would like to build some more open communication with them, and we invite some people because it's they are busy in their clinical side. Sometimes they apologize. It's not mandatory. It's an optional, but we try to encourage as much as we can. We provide them with certificates, sometimes with CMEs, to make it more attractive for them. This is what we do.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Carolina. Moving on to you, with the EFRS study that you shared with us. My question, I guess, is where do you go from here with respect to the countries that sat at that EQF level that was level 5 or below? So you said that level 6 was at the bachelor level, but you said that some countries are at that level 5 or even below that. Where do you think that you go from here, do you think, as far as trying to get those countries to go up to that level of level 6?
Yeah, that's a good question. There has been a lot of discussion around Europe about the aim of harmonization of the educational programs so that each of the programs in Europe would be in educational level 6, so bachelor level. And there has been, for example, some country now is during this summer they are applying. Practically they are fighting or applying to from their regulatory bodies to possibilities to increase the level of education. So, like I said, it typically each country regulates all the education in the country, and it's not about universities' own will to have the level at 6 or 5, but it might be mandatory to just keep it in certain level. But for example, EFRS has given support for certain countries to how to describe and how to formulate the education so that it actually fills the requirements at EQF level 6, and what are the things that should be fixed so that the educational level would rise. But I certainly think that the direction is to harmonize the education so that all the universities are at level 6, so that it's easier for students to have work in different countries or have an exchange or things like that. Good question.
Yeah, and I think what you were referring to with the EFRS was the framework. I think that other countries kind of look at, right? And I think I do agree. I think that it is important. I think that we try to get a lot of countries up to that level 6, which is that bachelor level. And the reason for that, I think, is because it actually shows our professional standing as far as the international standard class of occupation is concerned with the International Labour Organization. Because at the moment, we're actually sitting at what they call a healthcare workers level, which is not as recognised as, say, a healthcare professional level. And the healthcare professional level is what's going to help to push us up there and actually help us to be a bit more recognised as a profession itself. So thanks for that, Carolina. Christy, moving on to you, a question came through that asked, can you please tell me the gold standard of the AART as you stated in your presentation?
Sure. Yeah. And I was just actually typing in that answer.
Okay.
But basically, it just signifies that radiologic technologists have met those rigorous standards. So because of the credentialing requirements, the rigorous standards, the ART just signifies that every single person sitting for the national board exam has met those same standards. So in the United States, it's unique. I'll just kind of tell you about Mississippi. In our state, we have 10 schools, and of those 10 schools, 9 are housed in community colleges, and 1 of the 10 is at the university level, and that's the one that I'm a part of. So we've got 9 graduating cohorts getting their associate degree, and 1 graduating cohort in Mississippi getting their baccalaureate degree in the same year. All of those students sit for the same national board exam. Right. And so all programs are held to that same standard. We all have to have the same competencies required of our students. There are certain things that every single student going through a radiography program must meet in order to sit for the same national board exam. So it allows us all to ensure that our students are standardized in the requirements for taking those boards.
Right. Thank you. And with the clinical sites, when you're sending the students out to these clinical sites, how do you monitor to make sure that they're actually providing the correct care to the student and ensuring that they receive that quality placement?
Yeah, so we do put a lot of trust and faith in our clinical staff and clinical preceptors. So my program is accredited through the Joint Review Committee on Education and Radiologic Technology, JRC-ERT. And a part of that is that each clinical site has to be assigned a clinical preceptor. And then we have certain requirements that have to be met in terms of how many students can be placed based on how many radiography rooms there are and how many technologists there are and that sort of thing. So it's very limited. We cannot overload with students. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. So we do rely not only on our clinical preceptors, but we also rely on the clinical staff as well. The clinical preceptor, they're that person that's going to be the liaison between the actual program and the clinical site. And so I have a clinical coordinator. That's another requirement of JRC-ERT accreditation standards. I've got a clinical coordinator because of the number of students I have in my program. That clinical coordinator is the person in my program who really is going to be working with each one of those clinical preceptors. My clinical coordinator, confirms their competencies and their time that's spent in the clinical hours and that sort of thing. Any clinical issues that may arise, our clinical preceptor typically is the person that would contact the clinical coordinator, and it just helps to keep things streamlined and organized within our programs. So it's kind of multi-level. We have our clinical coordinator, that's the faculty member, the educator that is approved by JRC-ERT. And then as a program, we assign a clinical preceptor to each specific site. And then that clinical preceptor, they're the one who is going to be ensuring competency of the students, ensuring that they've met the time and those types of things. If there are evaluations that have to be completed, typically they're the person that will complete those. But they're also going to gain feedback from the clinical staff because
the clinical staff also work with our students. It's not just the clinical preceptor. So we realize that it takes a village, right, to raise a child. It's the same thing with our X-ray students. We really rely on every single person in that clinical environment because everybody's got their unique skills, and we need the whole team working together to teach our student because that's ultimately how they're going to learn the best.
Great. Thanks a lot, Christy. And Stephen, it was interesting, I think, to see that the challenges that you described, I think, right near the end of your presentation is actually challenges that I think we can all share amongst our countries as far as clinical placement is concerned. I just have another question. Is there any regulation of radiographers in most countries in Africa? Like, do they need to be registered?
Yeah, majority of radiographers in Africa are registered, though countries with the sole bodies that regulate radiographer only are very few. Majority, they are regulated by common bodies that regulate other professions, like clinical doctors, lab scientists, and the rest. But very few countries have their only body that either regulates radiation workers. Like in Tanzania, our body regulates radiologists, radiographers, medical physicists, as well as now they are including the biomedical engineers. But if you go to countries like South Africa, they are regulated by a common body with other professionals as well. Nigeria, they are the first, as I mentioned in my presentation, to have their own body. And now Kenya are coming up, because for them, they even have their own law that will protect the radiographers only, and they will have their own body. So otherwise, that is the status in Africa.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Thank you.
And just to add up, majority of the countries for licensure, you must do internship, as I said, for bachelor degrees. And for the diplomas, you have sub-attachment to senior radiographers to work with them for a certain time before they recommend you to the board for registration.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. There were a couple of questions that came through about unifying the curriculum across different countries and different regions. What I can basically say about that is that the ISRT have recently formed the International Academic Network, and we do encourage universities to join the International Academic Network, and you can find that on the ISRT website. And that would be a way that we can then discuss clinical education and how we can, or education curriculum, I should say, and actually trying to make that a little bit more unified. I have one more question for all of you, and again, thank you very much for joining us in that. And this question has actually come through from one of the Australian radiographers, Sharon, who I know, Greg, you've already answered this question. What is the most rewarding part about being a clinical educator in your country? And this is just the personal question that you can ask. What do you enjoy the most about it? I'm going to go around my screen, and Stephen, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, I think for the case of Tanzania, mostly is being proud that people have come into my hands. I helped them to become strong radiographers, and that is all. So about in increasing the passion within people, and for real, it has its own difficult situation as well, because not all that have that heart of helping without any tangible reward. Now we are trying to work to see also if we can have these clinical helpers to have contracts with the universities so that they can be rewarded otherwise. But as we are speaking now, is that pride that I'm working as a clinical radiographer and I have these people coming to me and I'm part of their lives.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Stephen. Mohammed.
I think to see people learning and like mainly self-motivation, to see learning and to see the profession, develop the profession. This is what I believe the most rewarding. In our situation, we have some other rewards for the assigned clinical educator, which is sometimes, which is I don't think so. It's the key here. It's financial. Sometimes we provide some financial support, but I don't believe this is the key here. It's self-motivation to teach our profession and to elevate the level of the profession up. This is what I think.
I agree, Mohammed. I think you have to really love the job as a clinical educator in order to do it, because there's a lot of downsides to it. But if you love it, then the downsides mean nothing. Hal, can you tell me what do you enjoy the most about your job?
Yeah, for me, it's basically the energy these young people are given. They're coming out with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of curiosity about what is happening and to share some of that energy give me motivation in my own job as well.
Wonderful.
So energy is, yeah.
Thank you very much. Carolina.
Well, I have to agree with the colleagues that obviously it's really rewarding to hear the experiences of students when they come back to academia from the clinical placements. And also I think it happens at the simulation when we talk about the experiences and learning. It's really, really rewarding as a teacher to see the learning curve. And I think when I'm tutoring also the students from the beginning to the end, it's also really rewarding to see the curve of learning. So yeah, I think that's the best part.
Great. Thank you very much. Christy?
So I'm glad that I'm going now because I've had so many different things that have gone through my mind. But one of the first things I thought about is that it's exciting to kind of share with the students that just because you didn't go to school to be a doctor or a nurse, or, those are the two professions most people think about when they think healthcare, that doesn't mean that you're any less important. And so, it's about letting them know you're not just a button pusher. What you're doing is critical. Without you, the radiologist can't see what's going on with the patient, can't diagnose the patient. The ordering physician has no clue what's going on. We are just as essential, just as critical, just as vital as any other person working in the healthcare industry. And the American Society of Radiologic Technologists came out with this amazing Be Seen campaign that if you've not seen it, I would highly recommend that you try to find that. But that's the fun part, is to see these students come into this profession and help them see the vast array of modalities that they can go into, and how it really is a fun profession. We have such an exciting thing that we're able to do and to help the patients in a different way. And I love as an educator to see their growth, to see their growth from day one, and how they may come in lacking confidence. And then once they find their way, they find their niche, they find what modality they really love, just to see that passion within them. And then I think what's most important is that we teach them professionalism, and we teach them best practices, and we teach them how to care for the patients to the best of their ability. If that was your family member, how would you want them to be treated? And so I think that's probably the most enjoyable, is just to kind of, pay it forward and hope that they're learning the best that they can to just go out and provide exceptional patient care.
Absolutely. And I think that Be Seen campaign, I think was amazing. I really enjoyed watching that myself. Finally, Greg, what do you love about your job?
Well said, everybody. Look, I think the clinical educator role is a privileged role. It's a privilege to do it. And I think there's nothing better than seeing a student come along in your workplace and seeing them develop the skills and become little professionals and practitioners. The thing that I like the best is when they end up becoming your colleague and you work with them every day. So you're seeing them progress from day one, where they hardly know what an X-ray tube is, and then the next day they're your colleague. And seeing your good self, Steve, the Director of Education for the ISRRT, I've seen you progress since you're a student in my department. So this this is the type of thing that fills you with honour and pride, just playing a small part in people's journey. So wouldn't swap it for quids.
Absolutely, and Greg, I've got you to thank for all of the work that I've managed to achieve as well. So, thank you very much on a personal note as well. Thank you very much to everyone for joining. Thank you very much to the speakers for providing us with your wonderful presentations and a wonderful, insightful discussion that followed as well. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you very much again. Bye for now.
Thank you.